I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your feeder flash for Monday, October the 19th, brought to you in part by Vitalix. Get the blue tub, in business for over 30 years. The feedlot starter tub, recommended for the first 21 days upon arrival, decreases pull rates, decreases stress, and increases saliva, which is important on getting calves to eating, and you guys know that. Your calves overwhelmed receipts this past week, and in fact, as far as your federal state market reports go, your percentage over 600 pounds decreased 12 percentage points in 1 week. That is huge. And a lot of those calves weighing over 6 were calves too, but I'm just telling you how much more the calves were instead of the yearlings. Not many yearlings left at all. Very, very few yearlings. And most of your bigger feeding type cattle are in fact calves. They're just backgrounded calves with a little more weight on them. But the calf deal is big, and I tell you what, I was around the circuit this week and just late in the day on your smaller consignments of calves, and a lot of them later in the sales and in your brick and mortar sales are unweaned and no shots. They're hard to peddle, guys. It's hard to get rid of them, hard to get somebody to bid on them, and it just makes the sales drag on and on and on. And it's just October, and that's just the nature of the beast. And as long as we continue to have 75% of our calves in the first half of the year, in the fall of the year, we're just going to have more calves than the market can handle, and more than the system can handle. We can't choke that many of them, but we're getting to late in the year here, and we're getting into an election year. Your managed money is kind of checking out, and we rely on managed money to be on the long side of the futures market. They're kind of checking out. It's getting close up here to the election. They're pulling their money back. They're going to wait and see what the election does. If Trump wins, they'll come right back into the market. If Biden wins, we're all screwed. So that's just the way that deal goes. But your grains have been very volatile here of late, which is not the norm during harvest. And harvest is going through like a buzzsaw. I tell you what, it's been dry, and most of your cattle people are just hating the dry weather. But your row crop farmers are loving it. They're cutting right through this harvest here. They've had 0 days of shutdown for the most part, and we are so far ahead of a year ago and the 5-year average. It's unbelievable. But still, our grain markets are moving up because we're expecting stocks after harvest to be down big, because we're seeing such big imports or exports for us, and imports for the Asian markets buying up our cheap grain, and that's a boom for the grain farmers. We normally don't see grain prices increase during harvest, but they sure are this year, and it's through our feeder cattle futures for a loop, and that's kind of the way it goes. And we rarely see that, but whenever it does happen, we know that the feeder cattle market's going to suffer from it. But had quite a bit of news from JBS, the farmer's friend. You know that, our Brazilian buddies that come down here and have tried to take over the animal protein market, and they've pretty much done a good job of it. But JBS was fined this week $280 million for bribery, basically from bribing individuals with millions of dollars and able to secure billions of dollars to grow their business. And that's kind of the way they operate. But on top of them getting fined that big $280 million, Pilgrim's Pride, which is in principle owned by JBS, also got fined over $100 million for fixing chicken prices. So that was a big week for the farmer's friend JBS, and that's kind of who we're up against, guys. And if you think these packers are in the same business we're in, you're fooling yourself. We're in the business of raising cattle. They're in the business of selling beef. But let's look at your futures market for last week. October live cattle futures, Monday was down $1.52, Tuesday up 47, Wednesday down 45, Thursday down 60, and Friday down 62. For the week, down pretty big, with October live cattle futures ending the week at 107.15. For those cattle feeders that like to have a basis. They've barely got a basis. They're clinging to it. They love to have a basis, even though it hurts the overall cattle market with the futures going down. But they're clinging to a small basis, and we lost market in our cash fats this week, and likely to lose it again if we don't get something done here. But December live cattle futures ended the week at 108.62. October feeder cattle, Monday was down 95, Tuesday up 82, Wednesday up a quarter, Thursday up 55, and Friday off 82 cents, with your October feeder cattle ending the week at 138.10. November was at 135.02, which doesn't bode well for the near-term future there. Your fat cattle trade through Thursday, 87,200 head in your 5-area feeding region. But evidently we've had a lot of cash trade on the East Coast and the West Coast, so we're expecting a big nationwide movement of cash sales, and your packers are going to come into this week with a lot of cattle bought, and a lot of the cattle that were bought a buck lower this week were indeed bought for 2 to 3 weeks out. Why sellers would do that, I have no idea, but they're in good shape now. So the last 4 weeks we had previous to this, where we were gaining a couple bucks a week, and we actually gained about $8, those days are over. And like I said earlier this past week, we've lost the draft now, and we're kind of hung out to dry here. But cash sales of steers and heifers range from 105 to 108, with your weighted average on live steers 107.61. That's about steady on the weighted average, but down a buck as a whole on your market. Your dress sales of steers and heifers 165 to 169, with a dress steer weighted average of 168.40. That weighted average price is roughly $1 lower, but your overall dressed market is $1 to $2 lower. We did have some cleanup sales, which will add to the 5-area region, but I'm not sure we're going to reach, even though we had impressive movement nationwide cash, I'm not sure we're going to see 5-area movement over 100,000. Iowa had negotiated sales confirmed on Friday of just 2,000 head from 106 to 107, so that's kind of steady to weak from what they'd had earlier in the week. And dress sales from 166 to 167, that's definitely weak to mostly $1 lower. Nebraska, about 1,000 head confirmed on Friday at 167. That's definitely a buck or so lower than they had earlier in the week, and we were kind of sucking wind at the end of the week, guys, and it doesn't bode well for this week coming in here. Kansas had about 1,400 head, 106 when the market was 108. It was likely on some plainer type cattle, but that had been $2 lower than the bulk of the trade earlier in the week. Texas didn't have any sales on Friday. Box beef cutout value is your weighted average for last week's sales, all of them. Choice cuts 211.74. You remember we were hanging right around 216 for quite a while, so they've been off that quite a bit, but that 211.74 on the weighted average last week was down $4.29 from the weighted average from the previous week. Select 197.94, so sub $2. We were hanging well just above that for quite a while, but Select Cuts weighted average was down $6.73 from the weighted average from the previous week. But at the lower prices, we did see pretty impressive movement nearby or current at 820 loads of cuts, grinds, and trimmings. Your slaughter, 654,000 for the week. Pretty impressive. We didn't have any of those problems that we had the previous week with dark plants or cooler cleanings or anything like that. So 654,000 was 17,000 more than the previous week, 11,000 more than the same week a year ago, and so we're now catching up. We're catching up a little bit, and maybe we can get those weights a little bit lower, and your average steer carcass weights did kind of level out from the previous report this week, so we need to get on the downhill swing of that a little bit. But let's look at your feeder cattle market, your real-time index on DV auction late in the week, 138.91. That was down 85 cents from the end of the previous week. Not terrible, but sure enough down. Joplin Regional Stockyards, They help us out here at DV Auction and National Beef Wire and the Feeder Flash. They're expecting 5,000 head here. You can watch that sale on dvauction.com starting about 7 o'clock in the morning. They'll be on the big bunches by 8 or 8:30, but kind of a lighter run for Joplin, but we should see a pretty good slug of those commingled cattle, and you folks in the four-state area, if you bring those cattle in before 5 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, you can commingle your small bunches of calves with similar cattle from other small producers around the area. They'll run them through, they'll commingle those cattle, they'll give them a one-shot respiratory vaccine there, and the buyers love it. They'll run those cattle on the main line about 11 o'clock in the morning, and they usually garner a better price. So that's a pretty good deal there. But your cash feeder cattle sales in your auctions, your feeder cattle were kind of unevenly steady to weak, and I'm talking about the few true yearlings we have left and your bigger calves that have to go right into the feedlot that have likely been backgrounded pretty heavily, so they're not all that attractive, but I'm taking that into account that they're selling at a discount. But not many true yearling feeders left, but there's not much place for them to go anyway. Your feedlots are full, guys, and now your growing yards are increasingly getting full because of all the calves that have already been sold, and it's been so dry all around. I'll tell you what, it's just hard to find a place that has had decent moisture. And the few places that have decent moisture, those are cow-calf places. That's cow country. So they don't have a lot of places to background many calves. But you go down in the southern plains where normally we'd be putting a lot of calves out on winter wheat pasture. There's not any winter wheat pasture for the most part. There's a few places where it's just barely coming up. A lot of places that wheat's been planted for 6 weeks and you can't even see it. Of course, there is some irrigated wheat out there, but the lack of wheat is making those farmers think that wheat's going to be worth something, and they're likely not to let people turn out on it. But just a tough go to find a place for calves right during the time when we have a world of them coming, 3/4 of the calves of the year being sold right now. But your calf prices were mostly steady to $3 lower. And that's on your wean calves. Par is wean calves, 30 to 45 days and 2 rounds of shots. And your discounts on unweaned calves with no shots just continue to climb, and it just gets astronomical this time of year, especially for you small producers. And I can't preach it hard enough, and I know you guys don't really want to do it, and some of you don't have the facilities and you don't want to spend the time and money. You got to wean your calves for several weeks, guys, over a month to 45 days. And you got to be able to advertise that. You got to get them on some kind of a shot program. It doesn't have to be a third-party verified deal, but you got to use quality products and be able to tell the guys at the sale barn whenever you sell them what they've had. And it's a whole lot better if they've had 2 rounds. But it's just, it's tough. But we did see some reputation strings starting to come in the northern plains, and whenever those do from your big northern plains auctions, when you get those big strings of ranch calves that aren't sold on the video that continue to come through your sale barns, we've got people, a lot of them coming from Iowa, eastern Nebraska, places like that, your farmer feeders that like to feed some calves this time of year. They go out to your big sale barns in the northern plains that have the big reputation strings. They get up to the edge of their seat when those big long reputation strings come through, and they're ready to bid on them. And in those instances, you did see really respectable prices on calves, but for the most part on your smaller bunches and those that are high risk or don't have everything going for them, the discounts continue to increase. But really, there's not much difference in price between your calves and your bigger feeder cattle, which a lot of those are calves too. But a lot of your 5-weight calves and 6-weight calves are selling in the high 140s and 150s. That's all your yearlings are going to bring too, and then they should be bringing less. But the discounts on the calves, because there's so many of them, they're just not bringing much difference in price. Now, we did see in Bassett, Nebraska, they sold as many 9-weight true yearling feeder cattle, steers, in the 150s as most places did 5-weight steer calves in the 150s, and that's just the nature of the beast here in October. But your biggest quotes that I saw late in the week and over the weekend: Bluegrass Stockyards, Richmond, Kentucky, sold 56 head of steers, 843-pound backgrounded steer calves on grass there, 138.70. That's a very impressive quote right there. Bloomington, Wisconsin, Bloomington Livestock Exchange sold 60 head, 909-pound feeder steers at 144. That's $5 over the index, 100 pounds heavier than the index. So that is a big quote. But a quote that I thought was very impressive, on the east side of Kansas there, Fort Scott, Kansas, Fort Scott Livestock Market on Saturday sold 101 head, 659-pound steer calves at 157.75. And that's your feeder flash for Monday.